Now, as you may have heard in the news, 9 men are being questioned in Rochdale about claims that they groomed teenage girls for sex. The newspapers have said all the men are Asian, but Greater Manchester Police say they're not prepared to reveal their ethnic background. All 14 girls, aged between 13 and 15, are white. Last week, we heard of the sentencing in Derby of 2 abusers and the controversy over the former Justice Secretary Jack Straw's assertion that this was a problem of primarily British men of Pakistani origin treating white girls as easy meat. Well, last September, we spoke to Emma and her father about what had happened to her. Her descriptions of the abuse she suffered were graphic.
I was about 12 when it started, and I used to go to a local shopping centre and with my friends on a Saturday on weekend, and some boys that were about 14 started talking to us, and we used to talk to them every Saturday that we went down to shopping centre for about a year. Then they started to get a bit older, so they had cars and they were nice looking and they were dressed in nice clothes and well groomed. So when you're 13, if a boy who's 17 who's got a nice BMW and he's dressed really nice in latest clothes and who's nice looking makes out he's attracted to you, then you're going to be flattered by it. We were always in a big group and you're always with your friends. It was in a town centre where there were people walking about in the open. So it's not like you ever felt as though you was threatened.
So when was the first time that you did feel threatened?
Probably when they took me and my friend into the disabled toilets and they pushed us up against the wall and things, and I said that I wanted to get out. And then when we got out of the toilets, we went up to the outdoor markets. He dragged me off round the corner, and then the next thing I know, he was on top of me, taking my clothes off. There was the other man holding my arms behind my head, and then all these other men that had come from nowhere, and 2 other men holding my friend. One was holding her hands behind her back and another was holding her eyes open, making her watch.
So at that point, Emma, what did you do? I mean, when it was all over, did you go home and immediately tell your parents?
No, I was in shock and I had blood all over my white coat. And my friend, she took me into the toilets in the bus station and took my coat off me and started washing my coat under the sink and told me to wipe my face and that everything would be all right and it's all right and that it'll just go away. So that's what I did.
The thing that people will... I mean, I listened to that, it's absolutely petrifying, and I don't understand, I suppose, why you ever saw them again. But I guess it's just not that easy to escape, is it? Once you're in it.
And once they've got you, they won't let you go. You see, they control the girls through the mobile phones, phoning them saying that if you, we're going to come and get you now, and if you don't come out, we're going to come into your house and we're going to gang rape your mum and we're going to make you watch and we're going to firebomb your house and we're going to kill your brother. So, and you know, when these men are doing that sort of thing to you anyway, you believe that they're capable of that.
Was that rape the worst experience that you went through?
He used to rape me once a week from then. I think it was just to obviously keep that fear over me and let me know that he was in charge and he was in control.
You did, I think, at one point end up in a flat, didn't you?
Yeah, they locked me in a flat in a bedroom and took all my clothes off me and then just sent man after man in.
And how long were you there for?
I was there for about 6 hours.
And you were a schoolgirl. This is, I mean, the rest of your life must have been carrying on. You were still going to school?
Yeah, I was still at school. I actually got student of the term while all this was happening.
Jason, can you tell us whether you and your wife suspected anything at all?
We didn't expect anything because it weren't as though she was stopping out late at night and not coming home or anything like that. They were coming home at reasonable hours. You know, when you know there's some parent intuition, really, you know that something's not right. My wife confronted Emma.
Well, Emma, how did that happen? Why do you think your mum said something to you when she did?
The night before she said something to me, my lip was cut and all swollen because he'd actually hit me in the mouth and then sprayed me with aerosol and threatened to set me afire. And I just said, I tripped up and I smashed my face on a bar. When I come home from school the next day, my mum was sat at the kitchen table and she said, I've just got I'm a mother and I've just got a gut feeling that, you know, something's not right. And I just broke down and I told her. I just said that I'd been raped, and that was all I said. And I think that I'd just been waiting for that opportunity for someone to, like, say that there's something wrong and, you know, you can tell me what's the matter.
Emma and her father spoke to Jane. Well, this morning a former detective superintendent is quoted in the press as saying such abuse was a problem in Blackburn as long ago as 1979, but he says the police were afraid to speak out because of fears of being called racist. So what is going on, and how can such exploitation of girls be stopped? Well, Yusuf Tai is a regional director of Forward Thinking, a charity which works with Muslim communities. He's in Manchester. Anne Cryer was Labour MP for Keighley for 13 years until her retirement last year, and she joins us from Leeds. Anne, how far back would you say this problem goes?
Well, I was completely unaware that this sort of thing, and Emma's description of her situation is pretty well identical to the situation of girls in Keighley, whose mothers came to see me out of desperation because they just couldn't get any action from West Yorkshire Police or Bradford Social Services. Now, when I heard their story, immediately I was a bit worried. I knew the BNP were hovering around, and I thought, is this a setup? But once I met the women and I heard their stories, I mean, it was, as I say, very similar to Emma's. It absolutely broke my heart listening to them, and I did everything I could, you know, to help them.
And Yusuf, how aware have you been that this was going on, and that there may be a presumption that white girls are easy meat?
I think, first of all, in terms of where this is going on, I think this kind of abuse of young girls and the looking down upon young girls is going on various segments of the communities, and there are, at this moment in time, even in the town where I live, you know, there are suspected cases involving girls, but as far as the race of the girls are concerned, it is not exclusively white. We do have, you know, there have been previous cases involving young Asian girls, however it's Asian upon Asian,
But in the cases we've read about, Yusuf, they are primarily white girls and primarily men of Pakistani origin.
That's quite right, but the cases we have read about are select cases which, you know, we've come up with this new term called on-street grooming, which has been, you know, bandied about in the press for the last 2 weeks, and I think it's very responsible, especially when you talk to the agencies that work with these people, whether it's the, you know, sexual health workers, the police in the local towns, or people from the communities that are dealing with such vulnerable girls who are involved currently in these kind of suspected cases.
And you have spoken out about it before for a long time. How concerned were you that you were being irresponsible?
It never occurred to me that I was being irresponsible. I'd spent many years arguing the cases of young Muslim girls, young Muslim Pakistani girls, who were being forced into marriages, and I assisted them in getting out of these unwanted marriages, and I also eventually, we did get through legislation to help them. And therefore, I didn't feel I was being irresponsible because I'd spent all those years helping Muslim girls. When white women came to me to tell me about the dreadful situation of their young girls, young daughters, aged 12, 13, 14, how on earth could I have said, well, it's all right, I'm helping Muslim girls, but I'm certainly not touching this because it's about white girls. I mean, it would have been absolutely ludicrous. So I helped all I could, and it took about 3 years to get eventually prosecutions and changes in the law.
Yusuf, what's been the reaction to these crimes in the communities in which you work?
Just before I touch upon that, just in as far as what Anne's saying, I think Anne's dealt frontline and in one-to-one cases with these individuals, and I think it'd be wrong to imply that someone like Anne is being irresponsible about this situation. But I think some of the comments we've had from various people who don't have a complete understanding of what's happening in these situations and don't have the frontline experience that someone like Anne has definitely been irresponsible.
But hang on a minute, Yusuf. I mean, we've heard of a former detective superintendent this morning saying nobody in Blackburn spoke about this because they were frightened of being called racists. we've had what Jack Straw has said. How do we get to the bottom of these kind of things if people are frightened that they're going to be called racist or irresponsible?
Well, I think Blackburn is a good case in example, because one of the initiatives that has taken place in Blackburn, just going back a few years to try and address this problem, is there's been a multi-agency approach between sexual health workers, between teams that deal with drugs and alcohol abuse, and the police in something called Operation Engage or Engage, and this team has been set up dedicated to look at the issue of vulnerable young people and sexual grooming, and it has helped in, bringing forward charges in some cases, but also helped with educating people who would be on the front line of trying to catch this kind of thing when it's going on, like the kind of signs that we Emma's parents spoke about, trying to pick up on those kind of signs from the young people and give them the confidence to talk about these things at an earlier point before these things take place.
But the question, Yusuf, is how do you, if these attitudes do exist among young Pakistani men when it comes to street grooming, we know that, there are men grooming children from all backgrounds and in all different kinds of ways, but how do you begin to tackle these attitudes on the ground if you're frightened of being called a racist?
Well, if we look at it exclusively as just Pakistani young men and try and deal with, just say, for example, we try to have educational programs and the authorities are on the lookout for certain Pakistani young men that might be involved in this kind of activity, then I think we're really missing a trick as a society. And the reason I say that is if we looked on the other side of things, for example, the Times did originally report, in its original report, did say that online grooming was a particular concern, or the majority of people dealing with online grooming, the perpetrators of online grooming were white people. If we were exclusively to look out for white people concerning online grooming, for example, I myself may have children who might be at risk from the groomers, and if we were to look at just white people, there are cases. I might be the victim, or my children might be the victim of somebody who doesn't happen to be white and is groomed online. So I think we're really missing a trick, because if we can't go down the road of exclusively looking at race, because if there are cases which do exist, there might be minority cases of whether it's Pakistani young men or the case in Derby, which happened to be the majority of those men were Pakistani.
How would you deal with this? I know you've been keen to involve Pakistani communities in finding solutions. Yeah. What do you want them to do?
I think I would like to hear from the community leaders, both religious and secular, and elders in the community as well. I think they need to explain to their community that when you see a young white girl of 12 or 13 dressed in a very skimpy top and possibly very short skirt, that doesn't mean that she's inviting sex from men. It simply means that she's dressing according to fashion.
But Anne, don't you say that to every lad, not just the Pakistani ones?
Well, the difference here is, Jenny, that Asian girls by and large dress in a very modest fashion. They're often in a kameez shalwar, and which I have no problems with at all. I have a number of kameez shalwar myself, which I like wearing. But it is a different sort of operation altogether, their method of dress, to the way of dressing of young white girls. Now, young Asian lads, I think, are getting the wrong message, and there's a misunderstanding. I understand where you're going, and perhaps we should be saying this to white lads as well, but I think white lads can understand that these girls are dressing just according to fashion and along with their peer group.
Well, Anne Cryer and Yusuf Tai, there we must end.